before sunrise reaches the highways and small towns of East Texas. A different kind of day begins behind walls few people ever see. The air is quiet. Metal doors remain closed. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. Inside one of the most recognized prison systems in America, routine governs every movement. For decades, the name Huntsville has carried a reputation that extends far beyond Texas. To some, it represents justice. To others, it symbolizes one of the most controversial powers a government can exercise. Yet regardless of opinion, one fact remains unchanged. The story of Texas death row is not merely about punishment. It is about law, procedure, time, and the lives caught within a system designed to deliver final decisions. At the center of that story stands the Huntsville Unit. Established in the 19th century, the prison became one of the most recognizable correctional facilities in the United States. Its red brick walls have witnessed generations of change, from shifting criminal laws to evolving debates about capital punishment. While many Americans recognize Huntsville because executions take place there, few understand the broader system that surrounds those final moments. The reality begins long before an execution date appears on a calendar. For an individual convicted of a capital offense in Texas, the journey through the legal system can span decades. A capital murder conviction is only the beginning of a process involving appeals, reviews, petitions, and repeated examinations by courts at multiple levels. Every stage is designed to ensure that the conviction and sentence meet constitutional standards. Years can pass between sentencing and any possibility of execution. During that time, life continues in a place few people ever witness firsthand. Today, male death row inmates are housed at the Huntsville Unit in Livingston, Texas, roughly 50 miles from Huntsville. The facility operates under some of the strictest confinement conditions in the state. Each inmate occupies a single cell. Meals arrive through narrow openings in steel doors. Recreation occurs alone. Contact with others is limited. The routine rarely changes. Morning counts, meal deliveries, security checks, mail inspections, legal correspondence. Then the cycle repeats, day after day, month after month, year after year. For some inmates, that routine lasts longer than many prison sentences imposed for other crimes. Men who arrived in their 20s may spend decades waiting as appeals move through the courts. Governors change. Laws evolve. New Supreme Court decisions reshape legal standards. Yet inside the cell, the environment remains largely unchanged. The passage of time creates its own unique reality. Some prisoners become immersed in legal research. Court rulings, procedural deadlines, and appeal strategies become central parts of daily life. Others turn toward religion, finding structure and meaning in faith traditions. Some maintain correspondence with family members or supporters on the outside. Others withdraw almost completely. The psychological effects of prolonged isolation have been debated for years. Supporters of the current system argue that strict confinement is necessary for security and safety. Critics point to the mental strain associated with years of limited social interaction. The discussion continues among legal experts, psychologists, corrections professionals, and policymakers. Inside the prison, however, debates matter less than routine. Routine is constant. Routine is predictable. Routine becomes survival. Then one day, something changes. An execution date is scheduled. The announcement marks a turning point unlike any other. Suddenly, years of waiting acquire a deadline. Attorneys begin preparing final filings. Family members receive difficult phone calls. Religious advisors increase their visits. Courtrooms that have reviewed the case for years may face one final series of emergency motions. Every hour begins to matter. Texas law provides multiple opportunities for legal review before an execution can occur. Appeals may challenge trial procedures, evidence, jury decisions, or constitutional issues. Requests for additional testing can be filed. Clemency petitions may be submitted. Judges examine filings. Courts issue rulings. The process can become intense during the final weeks. Yet even as legal arguments continue, Preparations move forward. Eventually, the condemned inmate is transferred from the Huntsville Unit to Huntsville. This transfer is significant. The inmate is no longer merely living on death row. He is approaching the final stage of the process. The holding area near the execution chamber is simple and controlled. There are no dramatic hallways or elaborate surroundings. The environment reflects the broader philosophy of the institution: procedure over symbolism. Everything has a purpose. Everything follows protocol. Everything is documented. Outside the prison walls, however, emotions often run high. Victims' families may prepare for a moment they have anticipated for years. Some hope the process will bring a sense of closure. Others are uncertain about what they will feel. Families of the condemned face their own painful reality. Regardless of the crime committed, many are preparing to lose a son, brother, father, or relative. Their grief unfolds under public scrutiny and often receives far less attention. The result is a complex human landscape that cannot be reduced to simple categories. Justice, loss, accountability, regret, all exist simultaneously. As execution day approaches, media attention often increases. Reporters gather information. Advocacy groups organize demonstrations. Supporters and opponents of capital punishment voice their perspectives. Yet inside Huntsville, the atmosphere remains remarkably controlled. Correctional officers continue performing their duties. Administrative staff follow procedures. Security personnel monitor operations. The institution functions according to established rules. This emphasis on procedure has become one of the defining characteristics of Texas executions. Supporters argue that consistency promotes fairness and professionalism. Critics contend that procedure cannot eliminate the deeper moral questions involved. Those questions have persisted for generations. Does capital punishment deter violent crime? Can any legal system completely eliminate the risk of error? Should the state possess the authority to carry out executions? What constitutes justice in the most serious criminal cases? No single answer satisfies everyone. That reality is evident throughout the history of Texas death row. Court decisions have altered who may be executed. Legal standards have evolved. Advances in forensic science have overturned some convictions. Public opinion has shifted repeatedly over the decades. Yet the system remains. The red brick walls of Huntsville still stand. The procedures continue. The debates continue. And somewhere inside a small cell in Texas, another inmate follows the familiar routine of counting days, reading legal documents, writing letters, and wondering what the future holds. For the public, Texas death row often appears as a single moment, a final headline, a brief news report, or a televised debate. But the reality is much larger. It is a world built on years of waiting, layers of legal review, strict routines, and difficult questions that refuse simple answers. And as night falls over Huntsville, those questions remain unresolved. Behind the walls, the system continues to move forward, quietly, methodically, one day at a time. For the men housed on Texas death row, time moved differently. Days were not measured by weekends, holidays, or seasons. Instead, they were measured by legal filings, court decisions, and the distant possibility that a judge somewhere might change the course of a life already marked for execution. Inside the Huntsville Unit in Livingston, Texas, every morning began the same way. Long before sunrise, correctional officers walked the tiers conducting count. Steel doors remained closed. Voices echoed through concrete corridors. Trays slid through narrow slots. Another day had begun. For most inmates, routine was everything. Routine created structure in an environment where uncertainty ruled every other aspect of existence. Some men spent hours reading legal documents. Others immersed themselves in books, religion, or personal correspondence. A few became known among fellow inmates for their knowledge of appellate law. Through shouted conversations between cells, they discussed court rulings, filing deadlines, and the latest developments in death penalty cases across the country. Hope often existed in the smallest details. A newly discovered witness, a forensic review, A procedural error uncovered years after trial. Any one of those developments could potentially alter a case. And everyone on death row knew it, because history had shown that even after decades behind bars, some convictions had been overturned. Some inmates who once faced execution eventually walked free. Those stories spread quickly through the prison. They became proof that nothing was truly over until every legal option had been exhausted. Yet those cases were rare. Far more often, appeals failed. One by one, courts upheld convictions and sentences. And when that happened, the next stage began: the setting of an execution date. Among death row inmates, few moments carried more weight. The notification itself was simple. An officer would arrive at the cell. Paperwork would be delivered. The date would be read aloud. No dramatic speeches. No emotional declarations. Just a date on a calendar. But that date instantly transformed everything. Suddenly, time became measurable. No longer years. No longer indefinite waiting. Now, there was a deadline. 90 days. Sometimes less. Every remaining moment acquired new meaning. For attorneys, the race intensified immediately. Phone calls multiplied. Emergency motions were drafted. Evidence was reviewed again. Experts were contacted. Every possible legal avenue was examined one final time. Some cases generated national attention. Advocacy organizations became involved. Journalists began investigating. Public pressure campaigns emerged online and in the media. Meanwhile, inside the prison, the condemned inmate continued living within the same concrete walls. But the atmosphere changed. Everyone knew. Officers knew. Other inmates knew. The countdown had begun. As execution week approached, security procedures increased. The inmate was transferred from Livingston to the Huntsville Unit. Known simply as the Walls, Huntsville carried enormous symbolic weight within Texas corrections history. The prison had operated since the 19th century and remained one of the most recognizable correctional facilities in America. Although most death row inmates were housed elsewhere, Huntsville remained the location where executions were carried out. For those arriving with an execution date, it represented the final destination in a journey that often began decades earlier. The transfer itself happened quietly. There were no public announcements, no media cameras, no crowds. A heavily secured vehicle transported the inmate under strict supervision. When the gates of Huntsville closed behind them, the final phase officially began. The holding area near the execution chamber was plain and functional. White walls, simple furnishings, bright fluorescent lights. Nothing about the space appeared dramatic. Yet everyone who entered understood its purpose. The inmate would spend the final days there awaiting the scheduled execution. Attorneys continued visiting. Family members arrived. Religious advisors met privately with the condemned. Conversations that had been postponed for years suddenly became urgent. Some families discussed childhood memories. Others attempted reconciliation. Some conversations were filled with emotion. Others contained long stretches of silence. No two cases unfolded exactly the same way. Yet nearly all shared one common element. Time was running out. Outside the prison, a different process was unfolding. Victims' families were preparing as well. For many years had passed since the original crime. Trials, appeals, hearings, and court reviews had stretched across decades. The approaching execution date represented another major chapter in a painful story they never asked to be part of. Some relatives planned to attend. Others chose not to. Each family faced difficult personal decisions. There was no universal reaction. Some hoped the execution would provide closure. Others questioned whether closure truly existed. The emotional landscape was often far more complicated than public debate suggested. As the scheduled day drew closer, media attention increased. Reporters arrived in Huntsville. News organizations reviewed case histories. Television crews prepared coverage. Advocacy groups organized demonstrations. Supporters of capital punishment gathered alongside opponents. The debate that had surrounded the death penalty for decades once again moved into public view. Yet inside the prison walls, the focus remained on procedure. Every step followed established protocols. Every responsibility was assigned. Every detail was reviewed repeatedly. Texas had carried out more executions than any other state in the modern era. Because of that history, the process was highly structured. Nothing was left to improvisation. Correctional staff assigned to execution duty underwent specialized preparation. Participation was often voluntary. Not every officer wanted the responsibility. Those who accepted the role understood the seriousness of the assignment. Many rarely discussed it publicly. Professionalism remained the expectation, but the psychological impact could not always be measured on paper. Some officers described the experience as simply enforcing the law. Others admitted that carrying out executions left lasting impressions. The emotional burden varied from person to person. The same was true for chaplains and spiritual advisors. During the final days, their presence often became especially important. Prayer sessions increased. Religious texts were read aloud. Private conversations stretched for hours. For some inmates, faith provided comfort. For others, it offered unanswered questions. As the final 24 hours approached, uncertainty remained. Despite the scheduled date, the execution was never absolutely guaranteed. Last-minute appeals could still succeed. Courts could issue temporary stays. New evidence could emerge. Legal teams worked continuously until the very last moment. In some cases, rulings arrived only hours before the scheduled execution. The possibility of a delay kept everyone alert. Phones rang late into the night. Attorneys monitored court decisions. Prison officials waited for final confirmation. No one assumed the outcome until every legal challenge had been resolved. For the condemned inmate, those final hours existed in a strange space between hope and inevitability. A court order could change everything, or nothing. No one knew. And so the waiting continued. Beyond the walls of Huntsville, the public debate over capital punishment remained as divided as ever. Supporters viewed executions as justice carried out under the law. Critics questioned fairness, accuracy, and the risk of irreversible mistakes. Both sides pointed to history. Both sides cited evidence. And neither side appeared likely to change its position. Yet inside the prison, philosophy gave way to procedure. The calendar moved forward. The clock continued ticking. And as evening approached, everyone understood that the next chapter would bring the moment the entire system had been moving toward for years. The final day had arrived. By the time an execution date arrives in Texas, years, sometimes decades, have already passed. Court hearings have come and gone. Appeals have been filed and denied. Attorneys have argued before judges at every level of the legal system. Families on both sides have lived through countless anniversaries, holidays, and reminders of the crime that changed their lives forever. Yet everything eventually narrows to a single day on the calendar. Inside Texas's correctional system, that date carries enormous significance. For the inmate awaiting execution, it marks the end of a journey that began long before arrival on death row. For prison officials, it triggers a highly structured process that has been refined over decades. For victims' families, it can represent justice, closure, uncertainty, or a mixture of emotions that defy simple explanation. And for the public, it opens the door to one of the most debated issues in modern America. As the scheduled day approaches, the condemned inmate is transferred from the Huntsville Unit to the Huntsville Unit. The journey itself is quiet. Security is extensive. Procedures are carefully followed. Every movement is documented. Unlike what movies often portray, there is no dramatic procession. Just another transport vehicle moving down a Texas highway toward a destination everyone involved understands. Once inside Huntsville, the inmate is housed in a secure holding area near the execution chamber. The room is simple. A bunk, a sink, bright lights, plain walls. Nothing about the environment is designed to create drama. Its purpose is functionality. Yet within that small space, the reality of the situation becomes impossible to ignore. The final days are often filled with meetings. Attorneys arrive to discuss ongoing legal efforts. Spiritual advisors offer guidance and support. Family members may visit. Each conversation carries unusual weight because everyone knows time is limited. Some inmates spend these days talking constantly. Others become quiet. Some focus on legal developments. Others turn their attention to faith. No two cases unfold exactly the same way. But one element remains consistent. The clock keeps moving. Even in the final week, legal challenges can continue. Emergency motions may be filed. Federal courts may review last-minute claims. New evidence is occasionally presented. Requests for clemency are submitted. Sometimes a stay of execution is granted. Sometimes it is not. Because of this uncertainty, the final days often become a period of intense activity for attorneys working on behalf of the condemned. Phones ring late into the night. Documents are prepared. Arguments are reviewed. Every possible avenue is explored. History has shown that unexpected developments can occur even at the last moment. And that possibility keeps hope alive. For some inmates, hope rests in the courts. For others, it rests somewhere else entirely. Faith often becomes a central focus. Religious leaders representing different traditions regularly visit death row inmates throughout Texas. Many individuals spend significant time reading scripture, praying, or reflecting on their lives. Some seek forgiveness. Some seek understanding. Others simply seek peace. Meanwhile, outside prison walls, another process unfolds. Victims' families prepare for the day ahead. For many, the execution date represents the end of a long legal journey. Some have waited years to reach this moment. Others struggle with conflicting emotions. Public discussions often portray executions as simple questions of punishment and justice. Reality is usually more complicated. Grief rarely follows a predictable path. The passing of time does not erase loss, and no legal outcome can fully restore what was taken away. As execution day arrives, Huntsville becomes the center of attention. Media organizations gather nearby. Reporters prepare updates. Advocacy groups sometimes assemble outside the prison. Some support capital punishment. Others oppose it. Different voices arrive carrying different beliefs. Yet inside the prison, the focus remains fixed on procedure. Every step follows established protocol. Every responsibility is assigned. Every action is documented. The system is designed to operate with precision. Hours before the scheduled time, final visits may take place. Family members sit across from the inmate. Conversations range from emotional farewells to ordinary discussions about memories and loved ones. There is no universal script. Every family experiences the moment differently. For some, words come easily. For others, silence says more than language ever could. Eventually, visitation ends. The waiting begins. Outside, reporters continue monitoring court activity. Inside, prison staff prepare for the next phase. As evening approaches, attention shifts toward the execution chamber. The room itself is surprisingly plain. There are no dramatic decorations, no symbolic architecture, only the equipment necessary to carry out the process authorized by law. Witnesses begin arriving. Separate viewing areas are prepared. Family members of victims may attend. Representatives of the condemned inmate may also be present. Selected media witnesses observe as part of public accountability. The arrangement reflects a principle that has long surrounded capital punishment in America. Although executions occur behind prison walls, they are not meant to be entirely hidden from public view. Shortly before the scheduled time, the inmate is escorted from the holding area. The walk is brief. Only a short distance separates the cell from the chamber. Yet those few steps represent years of legal proceedings, public debate, and personal history converging into a single moment. Inside the chamber, prison staff perform their assigned duties. The atmosphere remains controlled, professional, deliberate. Once preparations are complete, witnesses are allowed to observe. The inmate may be offered an opportunity to make a final statement. Some use this moment to apologize. Some express love for family members. Some maintain innocence. Others choose silence. There is no standard response. Only individual choices made during extraordinary circumstances. Afterward, officials proceed according to established protocol. The process is monitored carefully. Medical personnel verify required information. Prison administrators oversee each stage. Documentation is completed. When the procedure concludes, an official time is recorded. Then, almost immediately, the institution returns to routine. Officers continue their shifts. Administrative work continues. Prison operations move forward. Yet, beyond those walls, the impact continues to ripple outward. Victims' families leave carrying their own thoughts and emotions. Families of the condemned begin a different chapter of grief. Advocates on both sides continue debating what the event represents. And across Texas, conversations about capital punishment continue. Supporters argue that the death penalty delivers justice for the most serious crimes. Critics question whether any system can completely eliminate the possibility of error. Others focus on issues involving fairness, cost, deterrence, and morality. Decades of debate have produced few simple answers. Inside Huntsville, however, those broader arguments are largely absent. The institution's role is not to resolve the debate. Its role is to carry out the law as written. And that distinction lies at the heart of Texas's death penalty system. For generations, the Huntsville Unit has stood as one of the most recognized symbols of capital punishment in America. Its red brick walls have witnessed legal history, public controversy, and profound human tragedy. Yet perhaps the most enduring aspect of Huntsville is not what happens inside the chamber. It is the questions that remain afterward. Questions about justice. Questions about accountability. Questions about redemption. Questions about the limits of government power. Those questions do not end when an execution concludes. They continue long after the witnesses leave, long after the paperwork is filed, long after another date disappears from the calendar. And as long as capital punishment remains part of Texas law, those questions will continue to echo beyond the prison walls, carried across generations, unresolved, and impossible to ignore.